everyone, welcome. It is Transition to Telehealth, day 5. Hand behind my back. I need a hand because I'm a hand talker, but if any of you were taking data, boy did I touch my face a lot last time, right? So please continue, collect data, let me know. All right guys, day 5. So what did I do? On day 1, I gave you an introduction and we jumped into activity schedules. On day 2, I started to just open the door to reorienting ourselves to clinical programming in the times that we're facing right now. On day 3, I got a little specific in caregiver training. I'm gonna add a link to that one that has the matrix that I had showed you guys. And then day 4, I went a little off the rails. Thank you guys for the feedback. I just needed to make sure I took a step back and said, all right, there's a lot of different things going on right now, and the purpose of this webinar is to provide support to BCBAs that are currently transitioning to telehealth, right? And so I really appreciate people who watched number 4, sent me your feedback. I'm happy to keep doing these, and I'm gonna jump into it today. It's not really day 5, right? So it's actually day 6, but we'll call it day 5, and we'll just move forward that way because it's day 5 of this webinar. And for today, I've decided to focus on what we call the AEIOUs for effective communication. And I wanna clarify that for CABA BCBAs, I try not to assume things, but hey, we might have to assume some more things here and there moving forward because nothing seems to be super clear right now. But for CABA BCBAs, you are actively going through transitioning clients that you had primarily been providing services to in a one-to-one direct format to now being on telehealth. And I know that the other people watching are probably in varying situations right now. And for some of you, I do understand that your agencies have temporarily paused services. And I hope you're doing well. I know you're concerned for your families. And I trust that if that company or those of you that are still actively working in companies that are transitioning to telehealth, I trust that your companies are doing the same thing that we're doing at CABA, which is regular meetings with really specific guidelines. So my purpose in this webinar, besides getting you to ignore the noise in the background and recognize that we're all in this crazy new world together right now, my purpose in this webinar is to try to bring us back to some of the basics and really provide more of the big picture. So at CABA, we're having BCBAs watch these, but then when they go into their daily team huddles, their clinical supervision, their trainings around our new telehealth materials, that's when the more specifics come in. So if this continues to be helpful to people, I've spoken to many agency owners that have reached out to me with questions. I'm more than happy to share what we've developed internally at CABA for some of our systems. And a lot of it is based on researching the amazing systems that have been out there for a while, right? So right now it's about saying, hang on, if you were a BCBA supervisor that had never used telehealth and you have current clients transitioning to telehealth and or you're going to be accepting new clients in this model that is new to you, let me take us back to the basics of behavior analysis. And please know, if you're not a CABA person, that you really need to make sure that your organizations are following through with the specific policies, procedures, protocols, support tools, and structure, because the number one concern right now is that as they are lightening up some of the rules around providing telehealth, we really need to make sure that we're all still following very clearly defined systematic approaches based on a foundation of ABA. So that is that. So again, my topics are going to be broad, bringing us back to the basics. Why did I go with caregiver communication today? Because boy, is communication going to change for all of us, right? It's not just the format that we're dealing with right now. It's addressing the fact that people are going through a really stressful time. And when I asked for feedback from non-CABA and CABA people, y'all came back saying, please still do these, so thank you. You also came back with many comments that had to do with helping to work through challenging communication, feeling anxiety yourself, knowing the caregiver's stressed, trying to make sure you're still providing high quality services, and being scared about the new type of communication challenges that you're likely going to face, not only transitioning to a completely different format for how to support people, but knowing that not only are the people you supporting, but also you are completely terrified right now, right? So I thought of this thing that I made years ago, and I thought, is it time to bust back out the AEIOUs? I did it. Touch my face. Did you see that? Is it time to bust back out the AEIOUs to effective communication? And we still use these in our standard CABA training for both direct staff and supervisors. But I thought, is it really worth doing a brief webinar on them? And I pulled up the document. The link to the document is in the description for this, so feel free to use it. Please keep our information on it so people know that they can ask us questions, but it's there for you. And I hope you guys have the same moment I had when I pulled the document up. I was like, whoa, this is really weird. There's a lot changing, yet some things seem to stay the same. So when I originally wrote the document, I said this is an approach to communicating with caregivers. And I pointed out the fact, you'll read this in the document, that if someone qualifies for behavioral health services, that means by definition, they're currently experiencing a decreased quality of life. And that's not only challenging for them, it's challenging for the people who take care of them. And by definition, this also means that there's an increased likelihood that the caregivers are experiencing a great deal of stress in their daily lives. So it just was so weird for me to read it and think, wow, I don't even need to modify this document really. Like, this is what's going on right now. And I think I went on, I said something, you're looking at it, hopefully. I said something along the lines of, we are placed in the middle of this challenging dynamic. And we're doing it when we're trying to encourage caregivers to change their behavior while interacting with their loved ones who require those ABA services. So this isn't easy to do for us or for them. And I think the statement was something like, high degrees of stress paired with a decreased quality of life is a recipe for communication disasters. So welcome to the AEIOUs. And there are thousands of effective strategies out there for communication, all right? I by no means think that I'm the first one to come up with something to help people effectively communicate. I did think it was a good idea to go with the AEIOUs because, of course, the joke is if you know the vowels in the alphabet, then you can grab onto this tool pretty quickly. And we've used it over many years in many different scenarios, training and obviously in practice situations, and have found a great deal of benefit. So what are they, guys? The AEIOUs are values and related guidelines that are described in a very specific way, and the entire goal is to help us produce healthy and productive relationships between us as the behavioral health providers and those whom we support. So these guidelines are designed really for you guys to have, like I just said, an easy, accessible framework that can be applied across a range of communication scenarios. And I think it even says that in the document, which is funny because I didn't write it for telehealth, right? So let's talk a little bit more about what they are. And it's tough because I don't have visuals. I didn't do a PowerPoint. Please download the document or else it's going to be hard to follow me in this webinar today. But AEIOU, guys, right? A, acknowledge, assess. E, empathize. Yes, as ABA people, we care about thoughts, feelings, and emotions, okay? I, identify. O, offer input. And U, understand. So I'm going to break some of them down for you. You guys have the document. You can read this. You don't need me reading you a document, but I'm hoping by providing a little bit of context and a few key highlights that when you do read it, it's more likely to be like, oh, hey, hang on, this is helpful, and you can go out and try it, all right? So it's really funny. Oh, I touched it again. I'll put them behind. It's really funny when you read it because I gave one example when I first wrote the document, and the example was a caregiver that is upset because of a change in their service team. So again, guys, what were the chances that this would be what we're facing right now? So what did I say? I said the AEIOUs would be something that would be good for you as a BCBA supervisor to really embrace when you're dealing with one of those interactions when the caregiver is really upset that they're no longer going to have the same direct staff member. And possibly, I don't know if it happens to you all, but is refusing to take a substitute or concerned about the substitute, frustrated with you, all of the above. And probably likely that caregiver doesn't realize that it's the last thing you wanted to be dealing with also, but not your job or not really appropriate for you to be like, hey, I don't like this either. Although actually that might be a good thing to do, but let's pause. Let's say you're facing this, you're in this stressful situation. I say hopefully you know to empathize with the person and say, hey, I totally hear you and I know you're upset. And I've worked for a lot of companies over the years before starting my own where I believe that the BCBAs were not really comfortable with management and the ownership and just the values of the entire organization. And many times owners would come to me and say, I need your help because my BCBAs are inappropriately talking to the parents, right? So this is the time to make sure that, your values align, and that when you're empathizing, that doesn't mean, yeah, I know this sucks and this company sucks, okay? I'm not really worried about that happening at Kava. This is not some like huge format that I'm doing to indirectly talk to my staff, but I'm not worried about that because I have openly and transparently talked about this issue from day one of opening our services, and it's something that we highly value. And I'm not trying to judge other agencies that this happens in. There are different levels of management and different degrees of the extent to which management is interacting with the same type of caregiver interactions that you as a BCBA supervisor are. So I empathize with other companies, but my point here is that empathy alone isn't enough, and please be careful that your empathy is not serving to reinforce their statement, right? Because you don't know. And by the way, you don't know if even what they're saying is exactly what they're upset about. Your empathy needs to be a moment to say, hey, I hear you, all right? But I'll get to that, because first is acknowledge and assess, guys, right? So I gave you a grid. Makes it easy for us to see what's first, second, third, and fourth. I just highlighted the empathy part really to point out that I think a good clinician goes to this already. This is not enough, right? We need to look at a bunch of different domains, and I think these need to go in this order. So if you're looking at the grid right now, you can see that we break it down by acknowledge, assess, empathize, identify, offer input, and understand. And I believe the grid goes something like what, when, why, no, not why, right? Because why is for us to give good services and to build good rapport and to communicate effectively and to ensure that every step along the way, we're focused on the fact that our communication with a given caregiver needs to be about helping the individual client improve their quality of life. And our communication with a given caregiver needs to be based on a foundation of applied behavior analysis and in alignment with the policies and procedures in place for the organization that you work with. It's a lot of things to remember, but not really, right? When you think about it, ABA, quality of life for the client, and what your boss tells you to do. Please trust that your boss isn't just some evil person. They likely know a lot more about a lot of other things and have certain procedures in place to protect you as a practitioner and to ensure that the caregiver is getting the support that they need, all right? So on this example and on the grid that I provided you guys, I break this down. So take a look at those sections, because you're gonna see a real quick theme emerge. And that theme is perspective taking, all right? Even in the acknowledge, assess column, my first recommendation to you when a parent is facing you, I gave you the example of upset about a staff member, but insert whatever they're upset about, or maybe not even upset, just whatever they're talking to you about in that moment. And when you're listening and truly listening, before you jump into what am I supposed to say, why are they saying this, what's going on, what kind of input, or even nicely, whatever, I don't even know what the nice version is at this point. Wow, it is a lot that we're all going through, right, guys? But the point is, make sure you listen to their words, but make sure you're also identifying how what they're saying is making you feel, because that's going to put you in a better position to truly empathize with them. Because the bottom line is, many of you likely are working with caregivers that you have limited to nothing in common with, right? We all know there's the family that is unbelievably wealthy and you got to go through 5 security gates and there's nanny cameras everywhere and people that are cooking and cleaning, and I'm not judging that. Hey, I wish I had that in some ways, right? And you're like, wow, they're upset with me about something right now. I can't see it, right? Or the opposite. Somebody who is in a dire situation and in a potentially abusive relationship, which you need to be reporting as a mandated reporter. That's another topic, bad example. But anyway, and you're like, my life is so not this tragic, and so I'm having a hard time empathizing. And don't do that. Well, that sounded harsh. Don't worry that way about it. It doesn't matter if you have the same shared history as this person. You do know what it's like to be concerned about something, scared, worried, etc. So number one, acknowledge what they're saying, assess possibly what's going on differently than what they're saying. And I just moved right into empathy again for you guys. And I will give you a key that's in the document. Sometimes the best thing to do is to simply repeat back what the person is saying to you in that acknowledge, assess part. You can immediately say, well, actually, you're not going to say this until you're at offer input, but when you're listening at acknowledge and assessment, listen so that you are preparing yourself to repeat back to them. Thank you so much for communicating this with me. I just want to make sure that I hear you. You said, and echoic, okay? Just go with the echoic. Oftentimes, caregivers and staff and me don't even realize what we just said, so the echoic can be helpful that way. But it also can just help to really confirm that, yes, this is what the person's saying, and so now you're better prepared to make sure that you're providing them with effective information. So you're picking up that a lot of the AEIOU process was something I designed to try to get BCBA supervisors to step back and say, hold up, I don't need to rush to say something right now. I need to respect the notion of perspective taking and recognize that I need to take the perspective. I need to recognize that this person has a different perspective than me. Do you notice how I caught myself? I don't want to say you need to take their perspective because you don't know what that is. So you just need to acknowledge that you're never really going to know where they're coming from. So you have to go with what they are telling you. Confirm that. Say it back to them. Say, I hear you. You're saying this. All right. But let's go back to the order again. So you're acknowledging, hey, acknowledging it in your own head. This is what this person's saying to me. You're empathizing. Perhaps you're saying something in that moment as well. I hear you. I can hear that you're frustrated. You're then moving right into saying, okay, now it's time to identify. Now I can say, okay, what is actually the problem here and what is going on? And from there you can offer input. And I cannot emphasize enough, when it comes time to offer input, two things. Number one, what are your ethical and professional obligations and the scope of your job and your job responsibilities? And number two, it's okay if you don't know the answer to what they're saying, all right? So for number one, and those go together, because if you're in a scenario and a caregiver is asking you something, whether it's even a clinical question or definitely obviously an administrative type question, don't feel like you have to say like, I don't know, right? Because that's what you're worried about. That's what made you uncomfortable, right? Instead, you can say, wow, that's a great question. You know, again, I want to make sure I hear you, repeat what it is, and say, you know, before I answer you on this one, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to get back to you by and say it within the next 24 hours. And go ahead and say, I want to check with my colleagues at work because, you know, I just thought of a couple different things and I want to make sure I'm giving you the most effective, accurate information, all right? So I know that's not going to work every time, but more often than not, it will. And you should go to your colleagues and you should say, hey, this is the scenario. And right now, more than ever, is not the time for us to worry about whether or not we know enough, we're smart enough, we can do it on our own. We've got to rely on each other, guys. And finally, understand. I always say that behavior change takes time, right? For ourselves and for the people that we're supporting. And I pushed this perspective taking thing kind of, you know, not subtly, I said it a couple times, but if you look down on the why column of that grid, you'll see a common theme. My why is, how would you feel if someone was talking to you this way, right? So I'm always trying to take our BCBA supervisors back to consider the potential effects of your verbal behavior on the future responding of the listener. Is what you're saying right now, how is what you're saying right now going to produce the desired outcome here? And here's the good news. In a time of crisis, the desired outcome becomes way clear. Our job is to improve quality of life. Our job is to ensure safety. Our job right now is to protect against regression as much as we can. So in any given moment across the AEIOUs and the when, where, why, and everything, what are you saying right now to the person? And what's the likelihood that what you're saying right now to the person is really getting you one step towards those common values and core characteristics that we need to be protecting right now, all right? So let's get a little practical on it. I think there was a column that said where, and in the where column, it was kind of a joke. It was just saying you got to do this all the time. But again, CABA is going to be providing very specific communication guidelines to our BCBA supervisors, and anyone else watching, please make sure that you're looking for that support from your organization. So in the end, guys, my main take-home point is that reading a document, hearing me babble at you for 20 minutes, sorry, I wanted to go shorter today. I'll work on it. I'm getting better. That's not going to do it. So I gave you a brief recommendation section at the end, and we've actually done this before where we have taken a scenario and we've gotten 3 people together and we've practiced the scenario. And we have one person as the caregiver, one person as the staff member, and then the third person is watching the interaction between the two and actually collecting data on the AEIOUs. We've taken it so far to make sure that we had the person that was acting as the BCBA supervisor in this role play do the AEIOUs correctly in a given scenario and then demonstrate the inaccurate way of doing it. That way, the people that are watching that training, or just if it's the three of them, are having the opportunity to identify both exemplars and non-exemplars to the AEIOUs of effective communication. And that is your transition to telehealth, day 5. I hope it was helpful. Thanks again for the continued support, and I look forward to doing something again tomorrow. Hang in there, everyone. Gotta be taking care of ourselves before we can think about helping anyone else. I know that's easier said than done right now. Sending my love to you all.